Alrighty, well thank you everybody for coming to this session. I'll keep it very quick, but welcome to the stage everybody, Athena Savvas.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm mindful that it's later in the day. We're probably feeling a bit tired. And I'm not going to lie to you, this is a bit of a jam-packed session. I'm going to try to get through a bit of information today. But to kickstart, just want to introduce myself. My name's Athena Savvas. I'm the Sustainability and Impact Manager at DISSH. Prior to DISSH, I was the ex-sustainability manager at MJ Bale, led their B Corp certification there, which is an incredible experience. And before that, I kind of had a bit of a FIFO situation out of Cambodia. So not a traditional career journey, worked on the ground there for 6 years. And that's definitely led into a lot of my kind of approach when it comes to working in that space. So with that, let's dive in. Bit of a loaded question. It's a rhetorical, just for you to have in the back of your mind. But do you think you can change the world? So for today's session, we're going to go through two parts. First part is going to be talking about sustainability, what it actually means, why it's important, and how it can benefit your business. And the second part is going to be more around understanding the levels of intervention. If you want to embed sustainability in your business, what are the first steps you can start to take? So the question, what actually is sustainability? Could I just get a show of hands if anyone feels like they could comfortably answer this question? Yeah, I know. It's really confusing, personally. There's not many. We all have our own definitions. This is my personal definition to this question, and that is looking at the UN SDGs. So if you're not familiar with the UN SDGs, there are 17 goals that were agreed upon quite a few years ago now, and the agreement across these 17 goals is to meet them by 2030. There are 169 individual targets. It's quite a long shopping list, and at the halfway mark, which was last year, we're falling short in over half of them, which is not a great stat to start with. But in saying that, we are seeing progress. And what I want to bring your attention to on this slide is that you can see very quickly, you probably thought sustainability equals environment, equals planet, and it does. But very quickly, you'll start to see the wide range of areas that it actually covers. So it includes things like education, well-being, gender equality, as well as responsible infrastructure, clean energy, responsible production and consumption. Then it moves into your environmental elements that you think about, life on land, life in ocean. And finally, my personal favorite of all 17 goals is number 17, which is goals for partnerships, because doing this work is something that you cannot do alone, and it does require working together. But my short answer to that question on what is sustainability is it's all about impact. And I describe it as two sides of one coin. One side is how can you look to mitigate and reduce your potential negative impact. And on the other side is what can you do to amplify your positive impact, because that's really what we're measuring. So when it comes to why it matters now more than ever, there are three key things that I want to speak to here. One is planetary boundaries. Two is the incoming regulations and legislations. And three is that our customers are more informed and more empowered than ever. So looking at planetary boundaries, it's a bit of a mouthful of a phrase, but essentially what we're talking about is 9 environmental boundaries that were set that we've been told that we need to stay within. Last time it was checked, which was about 3 or so years ago, we were already exceeding in 6. So again, not ideal. But the planetary boundaries don't paint a full picture. I did just say to you earlier, it's not just about the environment, it's also about those social elements as well. And so I love this graph by Kate Raworth, which is the donut economics. And so you've got the environmental elements on the outside, but then you've got the social shortfall on the inside. And the goal is to live in the donut. Is how do we get into the middle where we're not exceeding planetary boundaries, but we're also meeting the social needs of our people at the same time. And so the goal here is to try find the balance. The next reason why sustainability matters now more than ever is regulations and legislations are coming in fast, hot and heavy, locally as well as globally. What you can see there is I've also got some examples of some news articles recently. The one that comes top of mind for me is Lululemon's case around PFAS has been a really big one. In Australia, we have no legislation around chemical use in our products, whether it be clothing or otherwise, unless it's physically consumed, but in any of our other retail goods. But in the US and also in Europe, there's a lot of chemical regulations there. So in a world where we're talking about growth and e-commerce on a global scale, you're no longer needing to just meet regulations on a local and a domestic level, but also considering the global regulatory framework as well. For anyone in here that's on the larger business size, we've obviously also got our mandatory climate reporting coming up as of this year moving forward. And if you're one of the smaller people and you're thinking, oh, as an organisation, we're smaller, we don't need to report, if you stock in any large size businesses, you will be one of their tier 3 and will also need to give them information for them to able to report. So there are a bunch of regulations incoming. Trust me, that list that you see there is literally what keeps me up at night. It's my worst nightmare. That's me trying to synthesize it. If you want to see it itemized, it's something like 90 lines if you go global. But it is things that we do need to start thinking about. And finally, it comes down also, this is all about the customer as well, is that customers are more informed and empowered now more than ever. And one of the biggest currencies that we can have as a brand is brand trust. So what you can see here is 2 different tables. One is from the World Economic Forum, which is listing our global risks ranked from short-term to long-term. But on both of those lists, you'll see that misinformation and disinformation is one of the biggest risks happening at the moment. So whilst we are talking about the information age and we're talking about AI, people are more skeptical now more than ever. And so building brand trust and making sure that we are actually doing what we are saying is more important now, absolutely more than ever. The other graph that you see here is from the Elderman Trust Report. And this actually really surprised me, that brands are actually the most trusted institution right now compared to any others for consumers. So that's on top of media, that's over our government. You'll see that closely, though, followed by employers. So whether you're considering yourself as a brand providing products or services, but as well as your brand as an employer. These are the 2 most trusted institutions right now, showing that the value of, for us to make sure that we're focusing on this. So those are the reasons why it's important from kind of looking at the potential impacts and the risks. But now let's make a bit of a business case. Let's say why it's also good for business and not just the scary thing that we need to be focusing on. The first one here that I've got is operational refinement. And so I think a lot of people think that when it comes to sustainability, it's an add-on. It's going to be more work for you to do. I'm not going to lie, it is definitely going to be a little bit more work for you to do, but there'll be some times where it also aligns with other business objectives and can potentially make even good business sense. A great example that I have here from our time, my time with DISSH, is we've been recently trying to transition all of our stores and spaces into renewable energy. Most people think that the transition to renewable and green power will cost you more, and in some cases it will, but you can find certain providers that will actually beat your current energy deal, of which is all fossil fuels. So we've been working with a great provider that not only has transitioned us to green power for all of our standalone or freestanding stores, but has consolidated them into one supplier. So we had one energy provider for every single standalone store at DISSH, but now all of our standalone is under one provider, and it's actually cheaper than it was before. So it's been an operational benefit. Our finance team don't have to deal with all the different invoices. It's just one for all of our consolidated locations, and me being able to put that cost proposal as a saving and not as a cost was definitely a bonus to get that over the line. So there are definitely ways that you can lean into sustainability that will benefit your business and your operations. The second one is recouping value. Now, this is one that I'm particularly passionate about, and it really is talking about circularity. And I think that this is particularly underrated and underused principle and business model in Australia. My controversial take is there is not one product-based business in Australia that is doing this well when it comes to circularity. And so what we're talking about here is looking at what you probably otherwise view as waste, or you've decided you no longer have control over and you've put it to out of your mind. For example, can I actually get a show of hands here who is a product-based business? Just so I can, okay, so most of you, great. So when you're thinking about your product life cycle, I'm imagining most of you are probably thinking getting it to the customer as the end point of its journey. That's the goal. I'm getting nods, maybe. But then what happens after that customer's finished with it? If that is actually still continuation of its product life cycle and its product journey. And so in most cases, actually, I dare say in almost all cases, our stuff's going in the bin. And so depending on what your product is, I don't know who's sitting here, but you can imagine your product probably right now is in landfill. I know when I think of our DISSH garments, it doesn't make me feel pretty good about that, to be honest. But that's the reality of products. However, that's us letting us lose value of the products that we're spending time and effort and care and passion to design when we don't need to. And so an incredible initiative that we piloted last year and formally become a program this year is our Recut program, where we've actually taken our unwearable DISSH garments. So these are garments that customers have had and they've had a fault that we're unable to repair, and these garments are no longer able to be either donated as well. And instead we're giving it it to final year university design students to use as their materials to totally redesign and make it their own. And last year, what we saw was absolutely incredible. I retrospectively should have probably put a photo up on this screen to show you. But one of the students, for example, that participated in the program is going to be at Australian Fashion Week next week, showcasing, which I call it Upcycled DISSH, but it's no longer Upcycled DISSH because it's a part of her collection at Tay now. And so it's been incredible to see how we can recoup value. And in some cases, it's financial, but in other ways, it's also engaging your community. It's building that trust back again, and also seeing how you can tap into, in this case as well, potential talent pool for us in the future when it comes to fashion designers. And the next one here is talking about, again, customer trust. And so one of the things that was a really surprising thing that came up at the start of this year around International Women's Day, we took a look back at the work that we wanted to do, but we're really impressed when Brand told us that our two most top performing organic posts on our social media in the last was 2 years, it's now officially 3 years, it's held its top rank, was our paid parental leave policy and our on-courtship program posts. They reached over 500,000 people globally, and they've been our top best performing. And it was absolutely blew us away that these two posts is what resonated with our customers. But it clearly shows the value, and that customers respond to things that align with their values to really build into that brand trust. So hopefully I've convinced you, if you weren't already convinced, that you need to start thinking about sustainability, whether it's trying to manage those risks and the concerns that are looming or at our front door, as well as all the potential benefits that it can have for your businesses. So now you're probably thinking, so where to next, Athena? What do we actually do? And the first thing is understanding your impact. I told you at the start of this call, the answer to the question, what is sustainability? It's all about impact. And that's where you can really start to realize where you put your effort in. So the first thing is understanding what you have an impact on. So really thinking about your product life cycle, thinking about your full value chain, and what are the things that goes into making it? What are the potential environmental or social impacts, as well as who is being impacted on that journey? The second one is, what do you want to impact? So if we think about that, what can you do to amplify your positive impact? What is areas that maybe don't directly relate to your business, but you as a business founder or you as someone in brand, it's really important to you. Where do you want to have a positive impact potentially? And the last one is, what is most important to your employees and your stakeholders? And that's kind of going to give you the direction on how to move forward. Now, with all these 3 steps in mind, that's still quite a lot of things to do. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on just the first one, is how do you even begin to understand your impact? And I have this very helpful framework done by Dr. Alice Payne. Now, I'm mindful that this is a fashion framework, so I've actually done a slight rework on the next slide to make it a bit more product broader rather than fashion specific. But what you'll see here is 3 tiers. And so she's put forward this idea of 3 tiers of intervention: product level, systems around the product, and then the wider company. And these are all the different ways that you likely have an impact on and the things that you can start to work on. And so let's dive into that. So the first one is around the product. And so this is where a lot of your impact is going to be captured. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation did some work here, and the number sits around 80% of your environmental impact is locked in at point of design. And so therefore you have a lot of power to make that change and to reduce and to possibly amplify your positive impact at that point. And so to give you a bit of an example on how you can make those kind of decisions, I'm going to go into 2 specific ones with the fashion context in mind. And so that's recycled yarns as well as your material inputs here. And so I'm not going to lie, there are a lot of things to think about when you think about your material choices. I'm not sure if many of you have or if you haven't, but very quickly when you start to get into this, there's lots of different things. So if we look at recycled yarns, for example, it's really lovely when people say that they're using recycled inputs. The first thing I think of is, has that recycled input been verified? And so here in the fashion context, it's having GRS certifications. But if anyone is using or is in a sector that uses recycled inputs, there are certifications attached to that. But if there isn't a certification attached to that, all of a sudden your source of that input's questionable. Now that sounds really vague, so I'm going to give you an example. Now this is a rumor. I have no confirmation of this, but I'm going to share it anyway. There was a rumor has it that certain recycled bottles that were being put into a bunch of different contents weren't actually being used in the first place. So they were like leftover, freshly made plastic bottles that weren't actually filled with liquid, drunk, and then recycled. And so that's what we're talking about, having a certified supply chain, is making sure that you're actually using a waste plastic that is being recycled, not something that was never used in the first place. So that's why having certified recycled inputs is incredibly important. And if you can't get that verification around a certified recycled input, there probably is a discussion to have is, should you be using that recycled input, or should you actually be looking maybe for different materials or other things to weigh up? When you go over to material choice now, again, lots of things to weigh up here. In the fashion context, sometimes I get asked what's the most sustainable material in clothing. There is no answer to that question. There is not most sustainable, depending on who you ask. You have people in the cotton field that will say it's cotton, it's regenerative. You can go back in the soil, you have people in the wool space that say it's highly recyclable, it's biodegradable, you can recycle it over and over again. You have people in the viscose, which is bamboo, saying that it grows really quickly, it's renewable, it's not moving into deforestation. So you've got everyone in all different camps on this area. And then you also have to think about functionality of your materials. You can imagine if you're making PPE gear out of natural fibers, it's probably not going to be very protective if you're a firefighter going into a building on fire. So you also need to think about functionality in your material choices as well, and trying to weigh up what's going to be the best thing for our product, thinking about all these different things. And if that wasn't a lot to think about, we also add the concept of designing for circularity into that as well. And so here is a little framework put together by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in terms of what we should be looking for here is when you're weighing up your inputs, is making sure that they are made from recycled and safe inputs, making sure that can be used more, so really thinking about the longevity of your product, and then making it so that it can be used again and again. When you put that all on one page, this is like a dot point as best to try articulate that. It's a lot of things to think about. And you can imagine if I walk into a design space, or if any of you in the product space, you'd be like, are you joking? This is on top of the product just doing the thing that I wanted it to do in the first place? Unfortunately, yes. And the question is, how do you then make the right choices? That is up to you. You as a brand need to decide and be informed and be intentional about those choices and work out what is sustainability going to mean to you and how you then go into back that if someone asks. Because it's going to look different for everyone, and that's more than okay. The next one is systems around the product. And so as we move into this stage, it starts to leave just the design and the kind of production space of a business and really moves into the wider part of an organization. And so whilst a lot of the impact is had at the product level, very quickly you can start to see the UN SDGs start to creep up here around the scope of impact. You can see that these are just the examples of the stakeholders involved in getting any of these things to move. Funnily enough, I've got green packaging or packaging on there. Ironically enough, I have a meeting tomorrow afternoon that I'm trying to move around with all the stakeholders. In that one meeting, we have executives, we have chief operation officers, we have head of brand, we have myself from Sustainability and Impact. I've also had to work with retail and our DC and our warehousing just to get with this. And that's just internal, and then external providers as well to make this happen. So very quickly, when it comes to work in this space, what I really wanted to drive home here is that leadership endorsement, cross-functional alignment, and stakeholder engagement is key. And that's why number 17, Partnerships for Goals is my favourites, because no one person can do this, nor should they be expected to. And the goal is to work together to get there, and be mindful that you need to get everyone on the journey nice and early to get them to where we're trying to move to. And the last one, you'll see a little slight graphic change in the middle that went from being a little t-shirt to being people. And that's because I think that's sometimes the missing conversation when we talk about sustainability and impact. We say businesses need to change. We say government needs to change. We say all these institutions need to change. We forget that all these systems are made and run by people. And that means that people also have the power to change the system, and that's why we're at the core of it. So when we start looking at wider company, and when we think about customers, not thinking about our external customer, but our internal customer, because they're your first customer, and that's your employees, that's your team. Those are the people that are going to be your first customers in the work that you do. And there's a bunch of benefits as well when it comes to, again, working in sustainability and impact. There's a boost in morale, in productivity. Now, when it comes to talent, to be able to attract and retain the top talent, these are the things that people are looking for. In a Deloitte study recently, they said purpose was one of the increasing factors when people are moving into businesses and what they're looking for life satisfaction. I'm looking at some of your faces and you're kind of agreeing with me because you're probably thinking about that in your own lives. So of course people want to have that sense of purpose. And really interestingly, they said for businesses that don't align to their values, that's when people are thinking about leaving. And so this is why, from a wider company perspective, leading into these initiatives are also really exciting ways to engage your team. And this is very admittedly and very fittingly, I've got some of our partners in the room, we've got Thread together here, and it's because partnerships like this is what gives the entire organisation the opportunity to have a piece of the impact and to be a part of the purpose change. And so the benefits, of course, is team engagement. We've seen in leaning into our partnerships in the last 12 months an increase of volunteering within our organisation by 300%. Which is absolutely incredible, which also shows you that teams want the opportunity to give back and be a part of community and to have that purpose when given to them as a part of their work. Of course, also giving back to community. And that last one there, I've got profits for purpose and business for purpose. And that's ultimately why I do what I do. It's because I think as an organization, it's easy. You know, your initial goal in most cases as a business is you were made to sell a product or a service to ultimately make profit, right? You need to be financially sustainable. But if you do that well, you can also do good for others and use your profits to mean more and to do more for other people. You'll also see some couple other initiatives introduced here. And so whilst on that initial framework, charity support was one of them, I've also added in internal programs and collective action, because we've seen some great examples of this at DISSH and seeing our team respond really, really, really positively. And that's been our work around, for example, the Encoreship, which is a program that we have historically been a member of, but last year took over as program facilitators. And that sees other brand partners join us in offering a 3-month paid placement for a woman who's been out of the workforce for an extended period of time. And this has been our way of aligning with other brands who have the same values, that empowering women and giving back to community is important, and how together we can be a force for good, not just as one organisation, but collectively as an industry. As I mentioned before as well around our paid parental leave, of course, it's us putting our people first and thinking about how can we look after our own internal customers, aka our employees first. And our DISSH Pride Scholarship as well is our scholarship that we provide to LGBTQIA plus creative industry students. We get $15,000 towards their tuition. Again, thinking about our future customer, our future internal customers. It's who is going to come into our workforces in a few years' time. One of them might very well be our future, we never know, head of design or senior designers in the future. And how do we nurture that next generation of talent? And so to wrap up all this level of intervention, if there's one thing you take away is where to start, is map your impact. Spend time to work out where that is and try to be bold and be brave to just start. I think the one thing that's really hard in this space is everyone tries to have the perfect solution or the perfect answer. And the truth is, as someone that's been doing this for 4 or so 5 years now, is there is no perfect journey, there is no perfect starting point, and to not let perfection get in the way of progress, because we just need to get moving, even if it's one step at a time, and even if it's one initiative at a time. And so today, just a quick sum up, is at the start we talked about sustainability, what it means. Hopefully a few of you now feel a bit more confident in defining what sustainability is. Your cheat sheet can just point them to the 17 UN SDGs if you don't want to have a long discussion on it, and say it's all about impact. And when it comes to levels of intervention, hopefully I've given you something to think about when it comes to the impact of your businesses, of your products, and a couple of ways that you can start. Just pick one of those things on that wheel. Go back to that wheel and just pick one thing if that's where you're going to start. And so my lucky last slide, I'm notoriously known in the DISSH 4 walls to love my quotes, and this is a quote that I use quite a lot, and that is, a little by little, a little becomes a lot. To finish, I wanted to share with you a bit of a theory of change that I personally have. At the outset of my talk, I asked that loaded question, do you think you can change the world? It's a question that I've asked myself quite a lot of times, and little Athena used to have these big, bold dreams, little teenage Athena, to go on and change the world. I then grew up a little bit, went overseas and did some of that work in Cambodia, and have to admit, got a slight reality check. I was like, maybe changing the world was slightly too big of a bite for me to take. And so I started to reconsider that notion until one day I was in a tuk-tuk ride and we were playing, has anyone heard of 6 Degrees of Separation? Okay, great. So I didn't know that theory existed yet. So we were playing this game, 6 degrees to insert whichever celebrity you could think of here, because we're just trying to pass time in a tuk-tuk. And so we're putting people in, and it was funny, we couldn't get past 4 connections. Couldn't get past 4 people, and we could connect ourselves to any, whether it was the king or whomever it was, whichever celebrity we could think of. And while I'm in this tuk-tuk, the wind was blowing in my hair, and I just had this random light bulb moment, and I went, oh, maybe that's it. If we can connect the whole world through 6 connections, or in my anecdotal case, we can apparently do it in 4, then maybe it's not about trying to change the world. Maybe my goal just needs to be to change 6 people's lives. And if theoretically we all just do that, by that same theory of 6 degrees of separation, maybe I can't change the world, but we can. Thank you, everyone. I aimed to leave time for questions, which I did. Yeah, we're still going. I wasn't sure if anyone had any questions for me, but appreciate all of you listening to today. Any questions from anyone? That was a lot of information for a Wednesday afternoon. Wonderful. With that, I'll give all of you some time back. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to stay up here and have a chat. I can answer your curly coilies, as I like to call it, hot seat questions, whether yourself is a business or whether you're just interested in a bit more about our DISSH journey. We like to share, we like to encourage other businesses to be on the journey with us. So thank you.